திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். பொழியர்கோன் வெப்பொழித்த புகிலியர்கோன் கடல் போற்றி. ஆழிமிசை கல்முதப்பில் அணைந்த பிரான் அடி போற்றி. வாழி திரு நாவலூர் வன்றொண்டர் பதம் போற்றி. ஊழிமலி திருவாதூரர் திருத்தாள் போற்றி. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். So today we are continuing our discussion on padhigam 7.39, tiruttoṇḍattogai. We have seen the life stories of all the devotees mentioned by Sundarar in this padhigam. So the final story that we have to cover is Sundarar's story. So that will take us a couple of sessions at least. So before we start on Sundarar's story, I thought that we can spend 5-10 minutes listening to the whole padhigam sung by an Oduvar. So let's do that, and then we'll go into Sundarar's story. So with that, we have listened to the whole padhigam once. Now we are going to start the discussion on story of Sundarar. So Sundarar, before we start this life on this earth, Periya Puranam describes the background of his life before he was born here in this birth. And the gist of that is that Sundarar was Shiva's what you can call assistant in Kailasam. While in Tamil we call that as Anukattondar, somebody who is closely moving with the main person and helping him with all the other things. So he is a name that is described as his name in Periya Puranam is Alala Sundarar. Alalam is Halahalam, and so the legend is that when Devas and Asuras churned the ocean of milk for Amritam, the deadly poison Halahalam came out, and it was burning everybody, and so they all ran to Shiva and sought his refuge, and Shiva sent the Sundarar to go collect that poison and bring it back to him. So Sundarar collects the poison and delivers it to Shiva, and Shiva swallows it and keeps it in his throat. So that is why he is known as Alala Sundarar. So one day when Sundarar in Kailasam was in the garden plucking flowers, two servants of Parvati, they were also in the garden plucking flowers, and for a moment Sundarar's eyes dwelled on those two women, and they in turn looked at Sundarar and their eyes dwelled on Sundarar, and so they had a moment of desire in their heart, but then they changed their mind and then they went back. So Shiva obviously knows everything, so he says, "Oh Sundara, you had desired those women, so you be born on earth and enjoy your life with those women and come back." And Sundarar was terrified, because it's like a worst demotion that we can think of. Somebody who is in Kailasam, but being sent to earth to be born as a human. So he falls at Shiva's feet and says, "Oh Shiva, you have to save me. Since you have said that I have to be born, I will be born. But once I am born on earth, I would be lost in the miseries of human life. The Maya that envelops the humans. The worldly life, the desires, the pains, sufferings, all those things will happen, and I will totally forget about you. So you need to save me." So Shiva says, "Don't worry. At the right time, I will come and save you." And accordingly, Alala Sundarar was born on earth and the 2 women were also born on earth. So this is the background story that takes place in Kailasam. So one question that can come to us is that, for somebody who is in Kailasam, will such things like a kamam ever come in their mind, right? Because Shiva is the one who burnt Kama. He burnt Manmata. So those who are living in Kailasam doing service to Shiva and Parvati, will their mind ever go to things like lust, Kama? And Sekar explains, why that happened. This is Shiva wanted Sundarar to be born on earth and sing tiruttoṇḍattogai, sing the glory of the devotees. So Shiva wanted this to be done, so he had to make Sundarar be born on earth. And even for Shiva, to make Sundarar be born on earth, he had to have an excuse. So Shiva made Sundarar think of those women in Kailasam, so that Shiva can make him be born on earth. So that's how Sekar describes the reason why Sundarar looked at those women in Kailasam. So now we come to the real story. So Sundarar was born as in the family of a Shivacharya. So Shivacharyas are the priests who worship in the temple. So there are Vedic priests who do the other samskaras, right? They do the yajnas, they do the other samskaras in life, the prohitas and other things, right? So those are called Vedikas, and they typically don't do puja in the temple. In the temples, they do puja, and the priests who do the puja in the temple are traditionally come from the Shivacharya heritage, and they study the agamas and they study the temple worship practices, procedures, and then they specialize in that area. And they take Shiva Diksha, and they can give Shiva Diksha to others. So they are known as Shivacharya. And so he was born in a place called Tirunavallur, which is about roughly 150 kilometers south from Chennai, 150-160 kilometers south from Chennai. That is the place, Tirunavallur. And he was born to a Shivacharya named Sadayan. Sadayan is the name of Sundarar's father that we saw in the 11th verse of tiruttoṇḍattogai. And his mother's name is described as Isaiñani. So to those priestly family he was born, and he was the only child. We don't have any description in Periya Puranam or anywhere else that Sundarar had any siblings, whether he had any brother, sister. We don't have any description. So we assume that he was the only son, and they named him Aruran. Remember Tiruvarur we have talked about many times. Tiruvarur, the Tiru is the prefix, Arur is the name of the place, and that is a very ancient kshetram in central Tamil Nadu in the Kaveri Delta region. And the Swami of Arur is referred as Aruran. The Swami of Arur, that's the meaning of that. And since the Tiruvarur or they were probably their Kuladevam, or maybe their family hailed from Tiruvarur previously. So they named Sundarar as Aruran. So that is the given name. Sundarar is the name that is we are using, but that refers to his name from the Kailasam days. The name that his parents gave him was Aruran. And Aruran was growing up like any other normal kid. And maybe when he was like 2.5 years, 3 years old, he was playing in the street one day. The kids play with various things, right? They have this, in today's world, we have this tricycles and other things. But in those days, they had toy chariots that they will be pulling on the street or doing those kind of things. So when Sundarar, as a Arurar, as a let's say 3-year-old child, was playing on the street, the local king, his name is Narasingha Munayarayan. He is also one of the 63 nayanmars that we saw. So Narasingha Munayarayar, the local king, happened to pass by, and he saw this young boy playing on the street, very beautiful boy, and he was attracted to this boy. Maybe the king didn't have any children, or maybe he didn't have a boy, so he wanted to raise this child as his own. So he went to the parents. Obviously he's a local king, and Sundarar's father, right? He's a temple priest in the local temple, so he knows him very well. So he went to Sundarar's father, nAyanAr, and asked him, I would like to, I like him so much. I would love to raise him in the palace as my, godson kind of thing, right? Not an adoption, but just he wanted to raise him. So Sundarar's father, nAyanAr, even though Sundar was his only son, he agrees. Maybe they were very close friends. Sometimes we have very close friends, and they say, okay, you can live in your place for half the time, you can live here half the time. That kind of thing. So Sundarar grew up in the royal palace as a sort of a prince. So as he was growing up, he learnt all the things that a Shivacharya should learn, right? He's a child of a Shivacharya, so he has his Upanayanam, he learns Vedas, he learns temple worship and all those other things, Sanskritam, he learns all of them. But also as a royal prince kind of a person, he learns the royal things. He learns the ways how the kingdom is ruled. He learns how to ride horse. He learns whatever else the princes learn, right? Sword fight, whatever else they learn. So he learns all those kind of things. So he's grown up, and now he's something like 16 years old. In those days, when the boys are like 16 or in that range, they get married. The girls get married like 13, 14, something like that, or even sometimes at 12 or 13. So they want to have him get married. So they search for the suitable bride, and they identify a girl who was daughter of another Shivacharya in another village, let's say 10 kilometers or so from Tirunavallur, and maybe 10-15 kilometers in that radius, right? So they both families discuss, and they agree that we should get your daughter married to our son and all that. So they agree, and then they schedule a wedding date, and the date comes, and you can imagine, right? It's a Sundarar's wedding, so he's sort of the prince. So they, on the morning of the wedding, they go from Tirunavallur to the girl's place. That place is called Puttur, and so the Sundarar rides a horse and goes from Tirunavallur to Puttur, that village. And in the Puttur village, they have established a big pandal, because he's you can imagine how big the wedding will be, because he is the prince. So the very major setup was done, and Sundarar arrives there, and then they are going through the rituals of the wedding. In the morning they do a lot of homam and all those other rituals before the Mangalya Dharanam and all that takes place. So Sundarar is there seated, and the priests are there telling all the Vedic hymns, and they are doing whatever homam, and it's all going on. So maybe you can imagine that maybe there were about 1,000 people or something were like assembled, right? It's a big event, maybe even more. And when this was going on, an old man, an old Brahmin, comes inside that wedding hall. He is entering the hall, and people are looking at him and say, there are 1,000 people, so he's one more Brahmana who has come. So then, as he gets closer to the center of the hall where Sundarar and others are seated, and from there he shouts in a loud voice, stop this wedding. I have a case against this nAyanAr, and he has no freedom to marry now. Then everybody is shocked. You can imagine, when a wedding is about to happen and somebody comes into the marriage hall and proclaims that stop the wedding, something like that, right? You can imagine what kind of commotion it would have created. And everybody is looking at him, and Sundar asks him, what's the issue? What is the case do you have against me? Let's settle it, no problem. And then the old man says, you are my slave. And as soon as he said that, Sundara started laughing. He says, are you crazy? I am a son of a temple priest, and you are a Brahmana, and the priests are never slaves. They are always free. Nobody ever claims a priest as a slave. This is the strangest thing I have ever heard in my life. Who has heard of a Brahmin priest of being a slave? Are you really crazy? Are you nuts? Your old age is causing you some illusion? Then that old man says, you can call me crazy, you can call me fool, you can call me anything. It doesn't matter. I am your master and you are my slave. And people start asking, and then he says, how do you claim this? Then he's holding a palm leaf manuscript in his hand. He says, here is a document that your grandfather has written, the agreement in which he has agreed that he and his descendants are all my slaves. And at this stage, Sundara says, okay, show me that palm leaf manuscript, let me see. And then the old man says, hey, I'm not going to show it to you. You are my slave. Why should I obey what my slave tells me? Slave should obey me. And then Sundara gets angry and tries to get close to him and grab that palm leaf manuscript. As Sundara starts approaching the old man starts running away. You can imagine what will be the situation. In the wedding hall, there are 1,000 people, and the old man is running, and Sundara is running after him. People are tripping over, whatever happens. So finally, the Sundarar catches hold of the old man, grabs the palm leaf manuscript that he is having in his hand, and without even looking at it, he tears it out, and then probably, he threw it in the fire that was there for the homam. So that whatever palm leaf manuscript that the old man was having is gone now. And so they say, okay, get lost. But old man starts wailing, is this the justice that you guys have? By destroying this document that I had, this nAyanAr has agreed or confirmed that he is my slave. Otherwise, why should he destroy that document? By doing that, he knows that it's a true document and that he's a slave, and he wants to destroy the evidence. So he makes a big hullabaloo, right? Makes a big racket. And then obviously there's a lot of commotion and there's a lot of chaos, and Sundarar says, okay, let's do one thing. Let's go to the court and decide the case. In those days, the court means the village elders, right? The village elders, they will assemble and they will hear both sides, and then they will pass judgment. In those days, there's no court system, right? Lower court, higher court, high court, and Supreme Court, and all those kind of things. It wasn't there. So it was a local village court that will decide the cases. And sometimes if it's a big case, or somebody may go to the king, and it may go to the king. Anyway, so they say, and so they say Sundarar's town is Tirunavallur. They are in Puttur, where the wedding is happening, and the old man says, my town is Tiruvanayanallur, which is about 10 kilometers or so from this place. Maybe 5 kilometers. I don't know the exact distance, but close by. And so they stop the wedding, and then they say, let's go to Tiruvanayanallur, and we can go in front of the village court there and figure out what is the situation. They could have gone to Tirunavallur, but that is Sundarar's town, so he may not get justice. They could have gone to the village elders in Tiruputtur itself, where the wedding was happening, but that is the place where the bride's side is. So the old man may not get justice. So they agree. This is what my interpretation. They don't explain that in Periya Puranam. This is my interpretation, why they went to Tiruvanayanallur. So they agree to go to the old man's place and he discuss it in front of the village elders. So they go to Tiruvanayanallur, and the village elders assemble, and the old man and the Sundarar, they all go in front of them, and old man says, this is my case. This guy, Aruran, is my slave. And then Nambiyarurar, he says, I am of Adishaiva heritage. I am a temple priest family, and everybody knows that temple priests are never slaves. No one has ever heard of any temple priest being a slave. And he puts his argument, and then the village elders ask the old man. He's the person who has brought the case, right? He says, we need one of the three to validate your claim. Either three things they say, Archi, Avanam, or Sakshi. So Archi means physical possession, that you have been in a physical possession, you have to show that you have had. Or Avanam. Avanam is document. You need to have a document which supports your claim. Or Sakshi. Sakshi is witness. So there should be witnesses to vouch for your claim. So basically, most of the disputes, right, comes in what? Property dealings, right? I sold this to him, and or whatever. He sold this to me, but now he's claiming that he didn't sell it, or whatever. Or he said he will pay me this much, but he didn't pay me. So these are the kind of typical property disputes, and other such disputes come. So one of the three things, if you say that this property is mine, show that you have had this property for a long time. That you have been living here, you have been farming this land for many years, to show that you have had physical possession. Or you show document. This is the document which documents that this is the agreement, and that's a valid agreement. Or have witnesses, some valid witnesses, reliable witnesses who can vouch for your claim. So he said, show me one of those. What do you have among these three? So the old man says, I have avanam, which is I have a document. The document that Aruran destroyed in the wedding hall, that is actually a copy. The original document I have safely with me. I knew that this guy could do something like this, so I didn't take out the original at the time. I only showed the duplicate. And he destroyed it. So the original I have with me. And Nambi Arora was shocked. What is this guy? He's like a magician. He takes out another palm leaf manuscript now. And the old man says, O elders, if you vouch that this document will not be destroyed by this guy again, I will give it to you. Village elders promised the old man, nothing will happen, don't worry, give it to us. So they take, old man gives that document to the village elders in Venayanallur. So they read it, and in that, there is a formal agreement, in the way legal documents are written, right? When you have a sale deed, how you will write, right? You will say, document what is being sold or what is being transacted, and then there will be signature of the seller, there will be witnesses to ensure that everything is well documented and foolproof. So they read that and say, I, Aruran of Navalur, hereby declare that I and all my descendants are slaves of the piththA of Venayanallur. This is my handwriting signature to affirm that. And there are witnesses, whatever. So this is the document that he has got. Now, the village elders, how do they decide whether this is true? Aruran, in Indian families, certainly in South India, the tradition is that, people name grandfather's name to the grandson. So like that, even though Sundarar's name is Aruran, it is his grandfather's name as well. So they were about to show it to Sundarar and say, hey Sundara, hey Arura, see if this is your grandfather's handwriting. As soon as the village elders said that, the old man stopped them. No, you shouldn't show it to him. He is a slave. He is not fit to decide on these things. There will be other documents his grandfather would have written, and they will be in his village. So you compare this handwriting with the other documents his grandfather has written and decide if this is his grandfather's handwriting. So the village elders send the people to Tirunavallur. So they go to Tirunavallur. Probably they went on a horseback. They went to Tirunavallur, and they reached the village elder who will keep all the agreements. In those days, when there were whatever agreements were there, the major deeds and all that, they will be stored in a local safekeeping. Because like we have a bank locker, right? In those days, the village elders, they had a system by which they kept all the documents, important documents, in safe custody, so that they can make sure that disputes are properly resolved and all that. So the messengers go to the Tirunavallur village elders and ask them to provide them any documents that Nambi Arurar's grandfather had written and filed with them in the past. Because his grandfather is no more. That's why all this is happening. So the Tirunavallur village elders take out a few documents that his grandfather had written and give it to them. So they bring it back to the Venayanallur court. So the Venayanallur village elders look at several documents that have come from Tirunavallur that were written by Sundarar's grandfather. They read them closely, they look for, they do the analysis, the handwriting style, the language style, all those things, and the signature. They look at all that. After comparing all those original old documents and this slavery deed, the village elders in Tiruvanainallur declare that this document that this old man has produced is a true and valid document, and because of that, Sundarar is slave of this old man. So that is a judgment that they pass. You can imagine, somebody like 16 years old, he was ready to get married. On the day of marriage, some old man comes and creates this kind of trouble. And now, within a matter of, let's say, half a day, right, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever is the time it has gone from the beginning of this day to the judgment. So over a period of 6 hours, he has gone from being a prince and a bridegroom to the state of being a slave of an unknown old man. So yes, Sundarar had no choice but to accept, because in those days, even though he was a favorite son of the local king, he had to obey the decision of the Tiruvanainallur village court. He says, he accepts the judgment and he says, okay, now that you have declared, I am his slave. And then the village elders feel a little bit troubled. We have given this judgment, but truly speaking, none of us has ever seen this old man before. And he claims to be from our village. There is something fishy here. Let's make sure that, we double check our judgment before, it becomes, otherwise it can backfire on us. So they ask the old man, sir, you claim to be from this village. Where do you live? We don't remember seeing you here. And then the old man says, oh, is that so? Okay, come with me, I'll show you. So the old man starts walking. Sundarar walks behind him because he's a slave. He has to follow. So he walks behind him, and behind Sundarar come the village elders, the Tiruvanainallur village elders who are trying to make sure that they have not made a mistake. So they all go, and this old man walks towards the temple. So they think that maybe he's living somewhere near the Agraharam, near the temple. And then he enters the temple. Now people are all puzzled. He says he's taking them to his house, but he's taking them to the temple. Sundarar follows him, the others follow him, and as soon as he entered the temple, the old man disappears. And then Shiva and Parvati appear on Vrishabha Vahanam, and they appear to Sundarar. So Sundarar has this divine vision. He says Shiva and Parvati, and immediately he realizes that it was Shiva who played this natakam, this drama of coming as an old man and claiming him to be a slave, and truly has made him a slave now. So you can imagine when you have a vision of the Lord, and that's what Sundarar was experiencing at that time. And at that moment, Shiva communicates to Sundarar the background, what happened in Kailasam, and the promise that he made, and that's why he came and stopped him from getting married, as Shiva had promised in Kailasam, that he will come and save him before he gets too lost in the worldly life. And Sundarar was so thrilled, he was in a blissful state, and he says, and Shiva says, since we came and claimed you a slave and you refused to be a slave, you were fighting with me. You were doing harsh. You said harsh words. You were fighting with me. So from today onwards, you will be known as one Tondan. Tondan means devotee or a servant, a devotee, and vanmai means somebody who is rough, somebody who is harsh, right? Like the bully kind of thing, right? Not a bully, but you get an idea. He is a rough guy who didn't want to be a slave and he had to be forcefully made a slave. So from today you will be known as Van Tondan, means a rough devotee, or that's a rough approximate translation, rough devotee. And Sundarar was so happy, and he falls at his feet and says, "Oh Swami, you have made me your slave now. Tell me, what should I do?" Because what is a slave? Slave has to do what the master asks, bids him to do. Right? So he says, "Swami, you have come and made me a slave. Tell me, what should I do now?" And Shiva says, "Sundara, all you have to do is, you have to go around this world and sing my glory in Tamil." And Sundarar says, "Oh Swami, I am an ordinary person. How can I sing your glory? What qualification do I have? I'm nothing, and you are such a all-knowing person. And what will I sing about your glory? And I don't even get any words. How will I sing?" And Swami says, "Don't worry. Whatever you call me, when you saw me first, start with that word." In the wedding hall, Sundarar called the old man, "Are you crazy?" So the equivalent Tamil word, what he said was, "Piththaro immareyavar." Piththaro means, is he a fool? Is he a madman? Is he a crazy guy? Pith means craziness or madness. And in Telugu also, same root, same word is there, I think. Pichi or picha is the root word. Pichivadu is the equivalent word, I think. So Shiva says, start with that word. So Sundara starts the first padhigam, piththA piRaisUdI. And he sings the whole padhigam. piththA piRaisUdI, Perumane Arulala, Yattan Maravadi Nenekkindren Manathunai, Vaitthai Pranai Tenbalvanai Nallur Arutturayul, Atta Unakku Aalai Ini Alleen Enalame. So in that song, he says, Atta Unakku Aalai, I am already your slave. All means slave. I am already your slave. Unakku Aalai Ini Alleen Enalame. Can I now say that I am not your slave? Now I am already your slave in Kailasam, and I am always your eternal slave. And now when you came and told me that I am your slave, and I said that I am not your slave, is that right that I said such a thing? How can I say such a thing? That kind of a meaning is the first song. He sings the whole padhigam in a similar one. We have seen that padhigam 7.1, piththA piRaisUdI. So he sings that padhigam, and Swami says, Sundara, since I stopped you from during your wedding, and you have come here in your wedding costume, dress, right? The way, what kind of dress we wear for a wedding, and that too is a royal wedding. So you can imagine how well decked up Sundarar would have been at that point in time, because he came straight from the wedding hall to the village court, and now he is in the temple as a slave. So Swami says, from today onwards, you will always remain in this kolam. Kolam is in this dress. That means you will be, all the devotees that we typically see, they will all be in simple dress. They will have a cloth around their waist, and they will have holy ash. There will be no vastram on them. So it will be like a simple devotees. We know how devotees will look. But Sundarar, because Shiva stopped him at the time of his marriage, and he told Sundarar that you can always remain in this way. So from that day onwards, Sundarar always remained well dressed, like he was a bridegroom. So whenever you see any picturization of Sundarar, you will see that he will have a garland on his neck, he will have a nice clothing on him, he will have a flower in his hand, he will have a stick on one hand. So it's like a wedding dress. So that's how he always remained for the rest of his life. And so Sundarar was in ecstasy. He sings the padhigam, and after that, he doesn't go back to his home. He doesn't go back to, he's a saint at this point, right? So he goes around the countryside, he goes around the kshetrams and sings glory. We are going to see his full life. One thing that we may be wondering, if not we should be wondering, is how Sundarar was fighting the case and not his father. Sundarar's grandfather, who wrote the deed, is gone. He is no longer alive. So the wedding was going to take place, and the old man came and disputed and took him to court and all that, right? And what does the deed say? I, Aruran of Tirunavallur, and all my descendants are slaves of the piththA of Tiruvanainallur. So if the grandfather was a slave, then Sundarar's father is also technically a slave of this old man, and Sundarar is also a slave because all descendants. So if there was a dispute, then Sundarar's father should have been the one who should have been fighting the case, right? When the father is there, the son will not be fighting this kind of a case, right? In the whole discussion, Sacred Art does not bring Sundarar's father in the picture at all. So my interpretation from that, inference from that, is that between the time Sundarar's wedding was fixed and when Sundarar's wedding actually took place, between that 2 points in time, Sundarar's father had passed away. Because only then, in the wedding, the old man could dispute with Sundarar. Otherwise, he had to fight with Sundarar's father. And similarly, in the village court, the fight will not be between the old man and Sundarar. The fight will be between old man and Sundarar's father. Because father is head of the household, he will be the one who will be fighting. So, based on this kind of inference, I am assuming, or I am concluding, that nAyanAr, that is Sundarar's father, was not alive at the time of his wedding, Sundarar's wedding. So this is my theory. So with that, we can conclude today's session at this point, and then in the next session we can continue the remaining part of Sundarar's life history. So if you have any comments, we can discuss now. If you are on mute, you can unmute and ask.
No, I think we are good.
Good?
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So this story of coming from Kailasam, Halahal Sundar. I think this is is it the only case of Nayanmars who has earlier connection with Shiva?
That's a very good question. So all the Nayanmars, right? Because they have been in the previous births, they would have done worship and they would have evolved to a higher level, and in this birth they were blessed to have mukti. But coming from Kailasam to earth, for this kind of a context, it is explicitly described in Sundarar's case. In Thiruñāna Sambandhar's case, he mentions it in one padhigam, one song he mentions it. But we don't have any details in Periya Puranam. There is a sthalam called Tiruttoṇḍattogai. Commonly today it is known as Kuttalam, between Kumbakonam and Mayiladurai. In that sthalam, Sambandhar sings a padhigam, and in that padhigam, in one song, Sambandhar says, மறக்குமாறு இல்லாத என்னை மையல் செய்து இம்மண்ணின் மேல் பிறக்குமாறு காட்டினாய்க்கு இழுக்குகின்றதென்னையே. So Sambandhar says, I was there in a state where I was always in your conscious, I was in your world thinking of you and nothing else. But to such a me, you made me take a birth in this earth. மறக்குமாறு இல்லாத என்னை. So I never forgot you in Kailasam, right? என்னை மைய செய்து you did a trick, or you tricked me, or you made me. மண்ணின் மேல் பிறக்குமாறு காட்டினாய். You made me take a birth in this earth. So Sambandhar says that in one song. Because of that, we can assume that Sambandhar was in Kailasam, and because of Shiva's will or wish, he had to take a birth on earth. So Sambandhar is of that kind, and that will be seen from Sambandhar's life also, right? He was a normal child who was about 2.5, 3 years old, and he was crying Amma, Appa, and Shiva and Parvati come and give him milk. So, and that Shiva and Parvati came because Shiva is the one who sent him here. Just like Shiva came to Sundarar, because Shiva is the one who made him be born here. So that's the only other saint who I can think of with a clear statement from them, their own voice, that they were made to be born on earth. Any other comments, questions? Okay. If not, we will conclude the session today here and continue next week. Tiruchitrambalam.